When I was 16, I went to a spring break party at a local motel room. And as you could probably imagine, teenagers, unsupervised, having a party, there was alcohol involved. Now, one of my friends decided that she wanted to drink an entire fifth of whiskey by herself. Well, she passed out before she got to the end of that bottle. And once that was discovered, well, some of the partygoers took her to the hospital. The party broke up, and I remained behind with a couple of friends to clean up the room, and we waited. And at 2 o'clock in the morning, there was a knock at the door, which I answered. And with a bright flashlight to my face, I heard a voice ask, "Is this room 113? Yes. Are you the ones that sent the girl to Sycamore Hospital? Some friends of ours did, yes. Well, she's dead. I never intended to become a police officer. But when I did, I swore that I would never become so cynical that I would deliver news in that manner. That conversation happened in 1980, and I still remember it verbatim. At 16, I was experiencing the shock, the guilt, the sorrow of the most traumatic event thus far in my life. And for this officer, it was just a Thursday night shift. How did we get here? Where does cynicism come from? You know, we didn't start out this way. Think back to the beginning of your law enforcement careers, back to the academy. Now, I have been an academy instructor for over 20 years now, like a lot of you in this room. And we get to see the hearts and the souls of our students when they come into the classroom. And we've watched the different characters that they become throughout the academy. I kind of divide it up into 4 different phases. It looks like this. Phase 1 is day 1, where they're sitting on the edge of their seats, eyes straight ahead with their brand new first day of school haircuts. And they speak only when spoken to. And if you were to ask them, why do you want to become a police officer? What would they say? I want to help people. Have you heard that one before? And they mean it. Now, phase 2 is typically about a week or so into the academy where they start to show their personalities and sense of humor, but they still remember words like please and thank you and sir and ma'am. Then we get to phase 3, and that's somewhere around firearms training. You've probably seen this, where all of a sudden their bodies transform and their chests puff out and they can't seem to get their elbows down to their sides. And they develop swagger, and they suddenly want to start chewing tobacco and grow mustaches. Thankfully, these traits dissipate after a few weeks. Then we get to stage 4, and stage 4 is graduation day. And they are extremely proud of their accomplishments, and rightfully so. During the academy, we've run them into the ground, forced them to memorize all the laws of the land. We've punched them, we've pepper sprayed them, we've tasered them, we've gassed them, we've shot them with Sims rounds. And on this last day, they are extremely proud of what they've accomplished. And for many of them, it's the largest accomplishment to that point in their lives. Some of them walk away with top gun, top academic, top physical fitness awards. And for many of them, these achievements become their identity. So then we give them a badge and a gun, and we send them out on their way into a world where people will hate them because of the uniform they're wearing. They're entering a place where people won't appreciate their accomplishments in the academy, a place where Egos are easily bruised and dreams are shattered. Where do we carry our egos? Is it something that we tuck away back at the office? Or are we wearing it on our chest like a target? And if someone mocks our ego, how do we handle it? For our youngest officers, someone challenging our ego is a brand new phenomena, something they've maybe never faced before. When you think about it, for our youngest officers, the majority of their lives have been spent in childhood and adolescence. That's a scary thought. You're 21, great. You've been an adult for exactly 3 years, assuming 18 is an adult. And so with that in mind, our young officers have spent most of the time resolving conflicts on the playground. They have defended their ego in something that I call playground rules. Here's playground rules. It starts with this. Step number 1. Insults are answered with like and similar insults. Kid number 1 says, "Your mom wears army boots." Kid number 2 responds with, "Oh yeah? Well, your mom's so ugly, even the dog won't play with her." Now this banter goes back and forth until we run out of material, and then suddenly we resort down to step number 2, which is loss of cognitive thought. We resort to name-calling and auto-responses. Kid number 1, "You're a stupid head." Kid number 2, "Oh yeah, well so's your mom." Again, banter back and forth until we run out of material, until finally we get all the way to step number 3, where words fail, leading to fisticuffs, and so begins the backyard brawl. Here's the reality. When we become police officers, we give up the right to play the role of kid number 2. And here's why. We know, statistically speaking, that 95% of our job is showing up and talking to people. It looks just like this. Officer with the badge, talking back and forth with the citizen. Now, this citizen could be a victim, could be a witness, could be a suspect, but here's what happens. The citizen is allowed to say whatever they want to and use whatever verbiage they want to use. But this isn't the case for the officer. Now, when I explain this to recruits, many of them say, "Well, why? That's not fair." Well, yes, it is fair, and here's why. The officer in this encounter is being paid to have this conversation. The citizen isn't on the clock. They're not held to the same standard. And in fact, if someone were to make a complaint about this encounter and go to internal affairs and they determine, you know what, you didn't do your job, we're going to take that paycheck away. Because when you're paid to do something, you're called a professional. And when you are a professional, you are expected to perform professionally. And if you don't perform that way, then away the paycheck goes. How many of you have seen young officers who get furious when a suspect runs from them? You've seen it. I'm seeing knowing nods in this dark room. And you can almost see the pounding of the chest in this Trooper Tarzan manner of, "How dare you run from me?" All of the tips and training that we provide in the academy, yet so many young officers don't know how to protect the ego, to protect their humanness. How do we protect our humanness? Well, we don't put our ego on the public stage. Disconnection is the key. There is a difference between who we are as people, our authentic selves, and the roles that we play in any given tour of duty. In fact, I have found it easier to handle every call for service the way an actor handles an improv skit. And it looks like this. Step number 1, you enter the scene and assess the situation. Is it safe? What's the layout? Step number 2, uncover the storyline. What's actually happening here? Step number 3, figure out all the other roles that are there. Do I have a witness? Do I have a victim? Do I have a suspect? Step number 4 is, what character do I need to be in this encounter? Do I need to be compassionate? Do I need to be enforcer? Step number 5 is you conclude the scene. So you make the arrest, you make the removal, or take the report. Step number 6, which is most important, we exit and then we take off our character and go to the next call. Step 7 is simply repeat as needed throughout your tour of duty. As professionals, we become the directors of the skit. We assess the situation and determine what character we need to become to play that role. Just as a coach would look at an opponent's lineup to determine the best player to put in the game, the officer/director rarely appears in the scene as himself, but becomes whatever character he needs to be to fulfill that role. Now, I have shared this idea with many veteran officers who have said, I do that. I've just never named it or never really thought about it before. But a lot of veteran officers can recall times that they've made up stories just to get along with a suspect. Perhaps they've carried cigarettes to offer to a victim even though they themselves don't smoke. Or maybe you've picked up an accent or started using slang words to better relate to a citizen. We can teach these things to our new recruits so that they can start developing the characters they need to become on the street. Now, when I start talking about characters, what exactly am I referring to? Well, I recommend that we all have 3 basic characters in our back pockets: compassionate, enforcer, and composed. Now, we know we need to be compassionate in this job. It might be that death notification. It could be talking with a lost child trying to figure out where home is. It could be dealing with that Alzheimer's patient who swears that someone broke into her home, stole all of her silverware, and replaced it with identical silverware. I call my compassionate character Grandma Seibert, who was probably the nicest somebody that I ever met. Now, to play this role, I simply emulate her mannerisms and her appearance. Now, Grandma was maybe 5 feet tall, so I shrink. Bent knees, head is down, my elbows are closer to my sides. My eyes are large only because my head is facing down, but my eyes are looking up. And this is actually an endearing quality. Think about Disney movies for just a moment. If they want you to like the character, the animators will draw the eyes larger than life. Think Bambi. Villains typically have smaller eyes, sometimes only slits. Also, for Grandma Seibert's character, she would only use proper English and she would never use profanity. Now, sometimes this job calls for more of an enforcement role. I call my enforcement character Jane Badass. But what if this isn't an easy role for you to play? It wasn't for me. If you were the class clown in your high school, chances are the enforcement role isn't necessarily that easy to play. We have heard horror stories of officers who were injured or even killed because they were too nice and they couldn't make that transition into that enforcement role. Well, here's how we do it. First off, we have to make the body as large as possible. Now, if you've ever watched ballet dancers, and I'm sure everyone in this room has been to the ballet, okay, for the few of you who've not been, let me share this with you. On ballet stages, what you will see is a larger-than-life body. Weight is on the balls of the feet, arms are away from the body, the shoulders are back, the head is up, the eyes could either be large or small, and thin lips. Seriously, watch what happens when I change my face when I say this line. Show me your hands. Show me your hands. Now, I didn't change the words. I didn't raise my voice. I simply changed the intensity by adjusting my face. Also, in speaking, you would use short sound bites. You would give commands, not ask questions. And here is a place where profanity is welcome. Like Mother May I, the F-bomb is a magic word. I'm hearing the chuckles of knowing nods again in this room. It's amazing how I can say, show me your hands and not get a response, but show me your effing hands suddenly does. Isn't that something? Oh, yes, ma'am, these hands. I'm sorry, yes. I will caution you about the overuse of this word, because if you use the F-bomb too frequently, it will lose its magical powers. If you use this term as a noun and a verb and an adjective, how will I know when you're really mad? Just throwing that out there. Our third character is for those times where we have to be in control, even in the most gruesome situations. Imagine a horrific homicide scene. You walk in, there's a torso of a body on the floor. I've got a severed head as a lampshade. I've got random body parts that are nail gunned to the wall. And I've got a grieving family member who just came home, discovered this, dialed 911, and now they're looking at you, trying to make sense of it all. Now, every fiber of your being might want to shout, "Holy cow, this is disgusting!" This is the time you pull out your composed character, Steady Freddy, who no matter what has been there and done that. The attitude really needs to be, oh, if I had $1 for every time I saw a severed head as a lampshade, well, here's what we need to do. The body is large to show that you are in control and in charge, but all of your actions and words are lower and slower. We are calm, we are confident, we're not animated, we're not rushed. And the face itself needs to be calm, almost bored, so that we don't show any adverse reaction to an already difficult situation. And those are the 3 characters I recommend. Now, there are officers who are naturally compassionate that need to develop that enforcement side. There are others that are strong enforcers that don't have a compassionate bone in their body. But you know what? We've got to be good at all of the roles. We need to provide the tools to allow new officers to fake it till they make it and keep the ego of Trooper Tarzan in check. We can teach theater sport just as we do the other physical skills in our academies. We would not put officers on the street without vests. We would not ask them to stand in front of a moving bus to stop it. We would not train them to lower their fists in order to take a punch to the face. So why are we putting new officers on the street without the tools to protect their authentic selves and then wonder why our divorce rates, alcoholism, and suicide numbers are so unacceptably high? By utilizing this set of characters, we can prevent officers from succumbing to cynicism, job burnout, and that frustration with a seemingly unappreciative public. The public is reacting to our role, not the real us inside the uniform. Someday, it may be your Thursday night shift, and you may be that officer responding to that spring break party at the local motel. And there will be an impressionable 16-year-old Chelley waiting with bated breath for news about her friend. This is a moment that will be captured in her memory for a lifetime. When that door opens, what will she remember about your character? Thank you.